What's up, y'all? Welcome to Uncle's Groove. My name is Justin Sweeney, aka Uncle Nephew. Today, we're going to do a mix breakdown for a song I mixed and played drums on. It's called Fusioncore by Sam Greenfield from his latest record, Worst of Sam Greenfield. So Fusioncore, right? This is a dope tune by Sam Greenfield. I don't even know how you would categorize this song. Obviously, it's a fusion tune, hence the name Fusioncore. It's amalgamation of different genres. This is a fun tune to play live. This is one of our, I think this is our last song in the set, and this was also a super fun record to mix because just all of the elements that are in it, the drums, the percussion, the guitars, the horns, just a fun tune to mix. And Sam did a really great job arranging this and making my job as the mixing engineer easy. This record was recorded at Bunker Studios by Alex Conroy, who did an amazing job. It was just a fun record to mix, man. And I'm amazed by myself as to how I was able to just make everything work and coexist together. And sonically just work together. So at the top of the session here, I always start with drums. I always go drums, bass, guitars, keys, synths, and then horns. And then we have some vocals, some background vocals in the session too. So at the top of the session, we have kick drum, right? So this is the main, this was the original kick drum that was recorded, right? I didn't really care for the sound of it, so I really cut out all of the low end, and I'm using it for the attack, the plastic high end sound of the kick drum. Then under that we have a kick sample, which is a sample of my own kick drum, which is a WTS kit, and it was recorded on a Audix D6 microphone, I believe, and this is just something that I did throughout the album. I also did it with the snare drum. It was something that I did to just give a consistent sound, something that I'm used to, and just to add more character and low end to the kit sound. Just something that you can't always get the best sound from the original source material, so sometimes I'll use samples, but sparingly. So as you can see, it's the main source of the kick drum sound. And then we have kick out, which is a FET 47 microphone. We have snare top, and we also have a snare sample on the snare top. Just like what I said, this is also my sample of my snare drum, which it's not this one, it's another one over there. It's a universal 5.5 by 14 Ludwig snare drum. Then we have the original snare top sound, snare bottom, snare 2, which is a side snare. It's a lower snare drum, lower tune snare drum, which is used in 2 sections of the song. And we have 2 toms, rack tom and floor tom. We have a mono overhead, a stereo overhead. We have hi-hat. We have a knee mic or crotch mic, which I believe is an electro voice microphone. I forget the exact name of it. And then we have a front of kick mic, which was a vintage RCA microphone. Then we have room mics, which I believe was a pair of Coles. And then all of this percussion here was done by Nate Worth, who did a really cool job. This percussion was added after I had already started on the mix, so I got a pretty good basis of the mix, and then I added the percussion after. These are all of my buses here for my signal flow. Then we have bass by Zach Geis. This is just a synth pad intro thing. I don't think I did much processing to it. Then we have guitars by Russell Gelman. We have a ton of guitars in here. We have some chug guitars, some rock chug guitars. We have like some ethereal kind of vibey guitars. Then we have like some high-end quarter note guitars. It's really cool. Then we have keys by Matt Wong, CP80 piano, electric piano. Then I believe we have a regular grand piano, acoustic grand piano. Then we have some synths. We have Juno. We have organ. We have Rhodes. Sam played Iwi. He also did saxophones. And then we have just a huge horn section, which you'll hear a bit later. And then we have some background vocals from Sam. So before we get into the mix, I want to go through signal flow. And I always start a mix with my stereo bus engaged. I never do a mix without that engaged, because you don't want to get deep into your mix or to the end of your mix and you start turning on your stereo bus and then the whole mix changes, right? So my stereo bus is in 3 parts. It starts with the Fusion bus, which is an emulation of the SSL Fusion Drive hardware box. For whatever reason, SSL doesn't make one plugin for the SSL Fusion, so I have to use the different instances of the Fusion individual plugins. And these are just settings that I basically stole from Edson Sean, who's a really good friend of mine. And it's just set and forget. I don't really change it much. And in your mixes, in my mixes, you do a lot of things that kind of keep you centered, right? So, you know, you have a template and you want to achieve a sound, and you have a sound. Obviously, every song is different, but you have things in your template that just kind of keep you on track, hitting your meters, you know, achieving a certain sound. And with my stereo bus, my series of stereo buses, I'm trying to achieve a console sound. Since I'm all in the box, I'm always trying to achieve a console-like sound. So we have the different instances of the Fusion box through all of these different plugins, and then I have an instance of the SSL bus compressor, which is doing the Dr. Dre, the famous Dr. Dre settings. And it's not even really doing a whole lot. It's just touching, just tickling the compressor. It's not really doing a whole lot. So on the SSL Fusion, let's start from the top. We have the Vintage Drive. We have the Violet EQ, which I'm not really doing a whole lot of things. And again, I copied these settings from a friend of mine, and I've been using it in my sessions, and it sounded really good. We have the high frequency compressor. Then we have the stereo imager, which isn't really doing a lot. The stereo imager is really just doing, it's really just boosting signal on the sides, you know, mid-side EQ kind of thing. We already did that. And then we have the bus compressor again, which is just really tickling the mix, just kind of tightening up the mix and just gluing it together. And then we have the transformer, which is, and how I have this set up, the SSL Fusion plugins, is in the order in which it happens on the hardware, the signal flow of the hardware, right? And so a lot of times you'll see input trim and output trim. I'm using this to, on the different instances, I'll use it, the trims, to kind of drive the plugin more, or I'll use it on the output trim to lower the level going into my stereo bus, right? And then in this song, there is a section where I'll play it. This is the intro section, main section here. So this is the main section of the song. And then we have this B section here, which this effect comes in. So I'm using RC20 to give me a lo-fi, kind of grimy and just softer tone to the mix, right? Just to give the mix, this section, a different atmosphere, a different vibe from the rest of the song. And this is something that I worked on with Sam. He was very adamant about having these two sections, this B section, have a different vibe and different character in the mix. And so now we can move on to my stereo bus. And again, I'm doing a lot of console emulation, right? So this is my summing, my analog summing plugin, right? Which is, this is a Slate Digital virtual mix rack. And it's just, this is the virtual mix bus plugin, and I am emulating the SSL 4KE console sound, right? Lately I've been using the Neve, but now I'm using, well, when I did this session, I was using mostly SSL, the 4KE, and I'm pretty sure I used the 4KE on the whole album, so I had a consistent sound. And this is just, I don't even know what this is. I'm using it as a drive plugin. More saturation. You'll see throughout this session that I'm doing a lot of saturation work. Again, because we're all in the box and we're trying to emulate a console sound. Next up, we have tape emulation from Slate Digital. Then we have the Oxford Inflator. Oxford Inflator is used a lot in mastering. It just does something to your mix. The perceived loudness goes up in your mix. It makes your mix sound fatter. It's a great tool for saturation. And then next we have the Dangerous Backs EQ, which is not really doing a lot. It's just doing some filtering. And then this guy here, this is a trick I got from Produce Like a Pro. I forget the exact engineer's name in which I got it from, but it's just doing some mid-side EQ. So we're cutting lows on the side. We're boosting some low mids on the side, where we have a little shelf, a low shelf on the mids. And this is all dynamic, right? So as you see, it's dynamic. So it's not really, it's not doing a lot. You know, the boosting is really less than a dB, but the it's being triggered dynamically. Then we have, we're going to finish off with a Chandler. And again, this is, a lot of this stuff is set and forget for me, and it's built into my template. And again, like I said, I am always mixing. I start a mix with my mix bus engaged, right? And a lot of the work that I want to do is under the hood, under the mix bus. So before the mix bus, so on the individual channels, on the individual buses, right? These are just, you know, this is probably a setting that I saw somebody using. I wanted to try it out, and it just worked. All right, so that is our stereo bus. Now we're moving on to the actual Logic stereo bus, where I have an instance of Golfos, which is a mastering plugin. Again, this is something that I saw a lot of engineers using in their mixes, and I was intrigued. I was like, what does this plugin do? So I found, you know, I tried some different settings. This was a setting that I found and put on a mix, and it just sounded really great. Then we have Gold Clip, which is a clipper from Schwab Digital, kind of emulating the Lavery Gold hardware unit, the A to D converter. That's that. And then we have Jason Joshua's The God Particle. For a long time, I studied Jason Joshua, his mix with the masters, and I was kind of doing my own interpretation of his mix bus, which was like you had to go through Isotope Ozone 4 and just kind of copying those settings. And then a few years ago, he came out with this plugin. And again, I'm mixing through this, and I mix with a limiter on, right? Because I want to hear what the mix is going to sound like with a limiter engaged. I don't want to go through the whole mix, then put a limiter on it, and then my drums are being squashed. Or do a whole mix and then send it off to mastering, and then the mixture sounds totally different because the mastering engineer is slapping a limiter on it. You know, so I wanna give the client, myself, and the mastering engineer a mix that is as close to mastered as possible, so we can, you know, there's not a lot of work to be done in mastering or post. So we've spoke about the mix bus. Now let's talk about signal flow, right? So I have my drums here. Each of my drums have a bus. So the kick drum has a bus, the snare drum has a bus, the toms have a bus, the overheads have a bus, the percussion has a bus, and the room mics have a bus. I call it drum room. And as you see here, I have some room emulation plugins for when I don't have sessions that give me room mics. And then the percussion also has a bus. And so all of those buses, the kick, snare, toms, overhead, percussion, they go to the drum console. I have on Jason Joshua's new plugin, Orion. This is a very heavy plugin. This plugin does a lot of work. It adds a lot of harmonics, which I believe is in this section here. I'm not using the drive section because it adds too much weight, saturation, and harmonics to the low end that I don't care for on live drums. A little bit of EQ, but this plugin isn't really doing a lot. It's just kind of, again, giving it the sound of analog emulation and of a console. And so from here, all of the buses, the kick, snare, toms, overheads, etc., goes from the drum console to the drum bus. And this is where I am doing all of my drum bus processing. I have an instance of SSL channel strip, again trying to emulate console emulation. I'm doing some light EQ, a dB&1 at 87 hertz. We're doing a dB&1 cut at 1K. We're doing almost 2 dB at 5K. And we're cutting some 7K, half a dB. A lot of filtering. So I have a little bit of compression going on here. A little bit of compression going on here. It's just tapping the compressor, right? And then from there, a lot of my level for the drum bus is coming from the compressor, but it's not doing a lot of compression. So from there, we're using this Slate Digital compressor, not even moving the needle. I don't like to do a lot of compression. I like for the instruments to sing. I like for the instruments to have a lot of dynamic range. And so a lot of the compression that you'll see me doing in these mixes is really just gluing things together. So from there, we have some tape. All right. Then we have some EQ, filtering out low end, filtering out some high end. A lot of what you'll see me doing EQ wise is subtractive EQ. This was probably a frequency that I just didn't care for. Yep, pretty much that. And again, some dynamic EQ. In this area here, in this frequency range, for drums in particular, I tend to hear a lot of mud, a lot of just unpleasant frequencies that I don't care for, so I'll cut them out a little bit. And then in the 5K area is where, specifically in snare drums, but I'll do it on the mix, on the drum bus too, you get a lot of character out of the drums in that 5K range. It just brightens it up to the point where it's not overly bright. And that's why I have this roll off here, because cymbals can get really bright and I want to tame that for the overall sound of the mix. From there, we have some Bax EQ. This is something that I got from Joe Carroll, where he used the I believe it was Joe Carroll, where he used the Bax EQ into an API EQ. This isn't really doing a lot, it's just shelving, and then this is doing a 2 dB cut around 400 hertz. And then this guy here is just doing some mid-side EQ, shelving off in the mids, shelving off some low end in the mids, and then you'll see I have another instance of this in another bus for the overall music mix bus, where it's monoing out the everything under 60 hertz. And then I'm also using it for some stereo width, and sometimes I'll use it as a gain knob going into the next stage of signal flow, which the drum bus goes to an all bus channel, or all drums channel, which I have this limiter on. It's not really doing anything, but you know, once the drums hit above this line, it'll kind of compress it a little bit and just keep it tucked in. I want my drums to stay in the same place for the entire mix, unless I'm doing some automation. Is this engaged here? Okay, so again, in that B section of the song, I have another instance of RC20, which is just adding some more vibe, some more lo-fi, more of a lo-fi sound to the drums and overall mix. Okay, so individual channel processing. So for whatever reason, I didn't like the sound of this kick drum, so I used it. I used this as just the attack, the high end of the kick drum. Right. And then I have a kick sample here, which is from my drum kit, my WTS drum kit. Oh, wrong EQ. Right. Again, subtractive EQ. I'm cutting out the high end because I'm getting it from the original kick in mic that was recorded. And then I'm cutting some gunk out of here. Frequency I just didn't care for. And also, I have 3 kick drum sounds going on here. So I have the kick in, the original kick in, I have the kick sample, and then I have the kick out, which is a FET 47. This doesn't really sound great to me either. So again, subtractive EQ, I'm cutting out the frequencies that I don't care for. And again, I'm sculpting the kick drum through 3 signals, 3 tracks to create one sound, right? So this FET 47 is giving me mostly low-end subbiness, right? Then this kick in sample is giving me an overall kick drum sound. You have high end, you have some lows. It's just a nice round sound. And then this original kick in mic is giving me some extra top end. And you can hear all of these together. This is creating the overall kick sound. So this is the kick group EQ, trying to tame, again, subtractive EQ, trying to tame a lot of that high end, which I don't care for. I don't like my kick drums to sound like plastic bags. I want my kick drums to sound like a kick drum. I want low end and I want thud, and I want it to drive my mix. We have a low cut at 36 hertz. This is the fundamental note, a fundamental tone frequency of the kick drum. I usually cut this out a little bit because you don't need to hear that note in your mix. And this is probably just cutting out some muck that I don't care for. Again, subtractive EQ, you don't see a lot of boost here. So Pultecs are what you'll see throughout my mix. A lot of times I'm just using the Pultec to, again, create that analog sound, emulating the analog sound, saturation, harmonics. I want to put these signals, these source instruments, through as much analog emulation as I can, right? So, some instances you won't see me doing a lot of EQ through the Pultec, but, on this one I'm doing a little bit. So Pultecs have an interesting curve that they create, right? So when you boost, you're boosting the a frequency range, and then it'll cut right under it. So a lot of times you'll see me do that on a Pultec where I boost and cut. So it's the frequency is at 100 hertz, right? And then the bandwidth, you can either go sharp, broad, or anywhere in between, and it'll it's not as specific of a frequency that you're focusing on. You're kind of focusing on a frequency range, and you're kind of sculpting that frequency range through boosting and cutting. So we have Soothe, which is being used in this instance as a side chain, which is ducking the kick drum whenever the snare hits. So I'll play that real quick. We solo the drums. A better example. So whenever the snare drum hits, it'll duck the kick. Whenever the snare drum and the kick hit at the same time, the snare drum will be more present. So a trick that I use in my mixes is parallel compression. Parallel compression is basically just duplicating the signal and processing that duplicated signal through compression, usually squashing the shit out of it and then blending that duplicated signal with the original. One thing that I see often is that a lot of drummers are adding a ton of high end on their kicks, right? So this really the 2 to 4K range of a kick drum. They're boosting the shit out of it, trying to get their kick drum to be present in a mix. Your kick drum shouldn't sound like a plastic bag. It should sound like a kick drum. I'm sending the signal of the kick group to another bus, and I am processing that duplicated signal on another bus. And as you can see, there's not a lot of signal being blended back in, right? It's barely even being added back in, right? So this is the Bob Powers method of parallel compression on kick drums. Boosting the shit out of the low end, 60 hertz. And then on this one, I'm cutting high end, but sometimes I'll just leave the high end as it is, because if you're squashing the signal, you kind of want that attack added back in. So with a DBX 160, I'm squashing the shit out of it. If I take this duplicated parallel compressed kick drum out, and then I add it back in, it's just adding a little bit more weight to the kick drum, and it's a way for you to make your kick drum, or any signal, it can be kick, it can be snare, it can be your toms, it can be vocals, it can be your whole mix. It's just a way to add more presence and weight to whatever that signal is that you want to add into it. So you don't have to add in all of that high end and have your kick drum sounding like a plastic bag. You don't need that. Parallel compression is your friend. So next, let's talk about the snare drums. So the original snare drum, let's check that out. Now, this, naturally when you record a snare drum, it's going to have some hi-hat bleed. So again, I'm doing some subtractive EQ. I'm filtering low end and top end. I'm filtering top end because I'm trying to get as much as that of that hi-hat signal, that hi-hat bleed out of the snare mic. And these are just frequencies within the snare drum that I don't care for. Trying to get some of that crack out of the snare drum. So I'm doing some subtractive EQ. And then, so that was the original signal. Now let's go to the snare sample, which is, again, same snare drum, just recorded at home and with less hi-hat bleed, or without any hi-hat bleed, rather. So I'm just doing some more surgical subtractive EQ, filtering low end, again adding in that 5K area, which is giving some character to the drum. And these are just probably frequencies that I didn't care for again. Yeah, just getting surgical with it. These are frequencies that I don't care for. Would you really hear it in the mix? Not really, but it's just my ears are sensitive to these frequencies, and I just try to cut them out. And then that's the main snare. And then we have the B section snare, which is a lower tune snare, and going to the same bus. And so the processing on that, again, cutting out, you see subtractive EQ all throughout this mix, cutting low end, boosting around that 5K area, getting out some of that top end, because this snare drum was on the right side of my kick where the floor tom normally is, but under the ride cymbal. So you can get some cymbal bleed in that I'm just trying to get out by cutting some of that top end with a high shelf. Trying to tame some of the fundamental frequencies of the snare drum through dynamic EQ, getting out some of that low mid gunk. You hear I have a reverb directly on the channel. Clearly, I wanted some more space, some more texture to the snare drum. I didn't want it to be as much of a direct sound. Let's hit that in contact. I just wanted it to have its own space. And so we have snare bottom, which is, well, side 2 snare bottom. Not doing much, just filtering out top and low end, and I think I missed the main snare bottom, which is probably doing the same thing, just filtering out top and low end. And this is probably a frequency, again, that I just didn't like, so I cut it out. And then, so on the snare group, we have a Fairchild, just doing some light compression. You should see the meter's not moving. It's just gluing it together and probably just giving me some level. Then we have a pull tech. Not really doing much, just attenuating 1 dB at 100 hertz. It's not really doing anything. Boosting at 10K and also cutting, again, because we have that broad bandwidth, which is not affecting frequencies so specifically. It's affecting a range of frequencies. Then we have this vitalizer. This is a preset. I'm sure it'll sound different if I bypassed it. Sounds like it's just adding some high end. Giving it some character. Then we have some more EQ. Maybe I just probably wanted some more crack out of the snare drum, because this is where the crack of the snare drum lives, in this frequency range. And then the capitator is a saturation tool. A lot of people use it for distortion. I'm using it for saturation. But in this instance on the snare drum, it's definitely giving it a level boost too. And then I'm pretty sure, okay, this isn't really doing anything. It's just on. Sometimes it'd be like that. So I'm not a big fan of gates on drums, right? So as you see for the toms and all throughout the mix, I will cut wherever the toms are not being hit, right? Because you don't want the bleed to be in your mix, right? Especially when you're compressing and you're doing all kinds of processing to these signals, right? So in this mix at the time, I didn't have this Oxford drum gate, but now I do. So the really cool thing about this drum gate is that it has different settings for the different drums, kick, snare, and toms, right? And you can set your threshold, and you can mess with the decay to just fine tune the gate. This is the drum gate, not engage. So you hear all of that, all of the bleed, right? So now if I engage the drum gate, I can set it for toms, right? And these are your transients, which is when the drum is being hit. So it immediately gated the drum, right? But if I want more of the drum sound, I can mess with the decay. Right? It's just a cool tool to tighten up your drum sounds, but specifically on toms, snares, kicks, and it saves you from having to do all of this editing, because you really just want to mix. You don't want to do all of this editing. This is time consuming. So for the toms, let's check out the processing for that. Hi Tom. This is just settings that I came up with over time that through working with drums for 10 years, you learn the frequency ranges in which you don't like the characters of the drum, right? So on the high tom, let's just solo that real quick. It's not gonna sound great on its own, but it's gonna sound nice in the mix. I don't care for that sound, so I ducked it. I cut it out. Same thing there. These are just frequencies within the drum that I don't care for, and then I'll usually boost some top end just to have some more attack coming out of the drum so it can cut through the mix a little bit. And then I'll do a low shelf boost on the low end where the fundamental frequencies of the drum are. And then I'll cut anything under a certain frequency of low end because you don't need all of that low end rumble that's going to get in the way of your kick drum. Same thing with the floor tom, same kind of deal, cutting out the frequencies that I'm not a fan of, and then I'm doing a low shelf boost. This is probably acting as nothing. There's some EQ going on, but it's not doing a whole lot. And so on the tom group, I'm doing even more of subtractive EQ, getting out the frequencies that I don't care for low end and high end filters. And then I'm using the DBX 160 for a little compression. Then this is just doing some slight EQ, not a whole lot. And then I wanted some reverb on the toms. I wanted it to have its own space. Okay, so moving on to the overheads, where I have a mono overhead, which I think is a U67, a Neumann U67, cutting out some low end, cutting out some mids. So I'm probably just getting some frequencies that I don't care for here again. Yeah, just cutting out that honk sound. Then we have the stereo overheads, which I'm doing even more subtractive EQ in this area. In overheads, this area gets a little honky. It's a little honky and muddy and kind of distorts a little bit, like a distorted kind of sound. And I always just try to cut that out on my overheads. What are we doing here? The compressor's not engaged. I'm cutting out all of the low end. I'm doing a 15 dB cut on everything under 66 hertz, while I'm also doing some filtering. Clearly, I just wanted to get all of the low end out of these overheads. Clearly, again, filtering out low end, filtering out top end, because your cymbals can get very bright and like hissy in your entire mix. Again, cutting out those honky frequencies that I don't care for in the overheads, doing some more surgical subtractive EQ, and then we're finishing it off with the distressor, doing some light compression on the overheads to glue it together, bring up some perceived level. And with overheads, you kind of want to compress it just to keep the signal more consistent. Because you're hitting cymbals, you're hitting snares, you're hitting toms. It's the overall sound of your kit. So you just want to compress it a little bit to make it more dynamically pleasing. Okay. And then also I have my hi-hats running into my... usually I have it going to my overhead bus. But on the hi-hats, I'm just cutting out all of the lows because I don't need any stuff. I don't need any low end because you have some snare bleed. You don't need that. And then I'm also doing a high shelf just to tame some of those high frequencies. Right? And so we have the room mics, which is a knee mic, electro voice, which is in the crotch position over the kick drum between the rack and floor toms, pointed down, I believe. At the kick drum, sometimes I'll point it straight at the side of the snare, but some engineers point it down at the kick drum, depending if you want more kick sound, if you want more snare sound. But it's kind of like an overall kick microphone sound that you're getting from it. Play from here. It's not a lot of low end, it's not a lot of high end, it's just kind of mid-heavy, which adds some attack to your drum sound. Right, then we have the front of kick mic, which is a vintage RCA microphone, ribbon microphone. Again, you're not getting a lot of low end from that. And then we have the stereo room mics, which is a pair of Coles. And together they make this sound. In the process I'm doing on that, I'm just cutting out some low end, I'm shelving some low end, rolling off low end, I'm cutting out these frequencies that I don't care for, because these room mics can be mid-heavy and kind of gunky. Anytime I hear stuff like that, I'm trying to cut it out. I'm trying to shape the sound of the drum kit overall. Now moving on, we have percussion from Nate Worth from Snarky Puppy. I'll just play this all together. We have cowbells, we have congas, we have tambourines, we have shakers, we have go-go bells. So I didn't do any individual processing on the percussion tracks, but I did EQ, which is basically rolling off low end and some high end, and then I did some compression. These were recorded really well by Nate. And then I'm just adding in some reverb on the channel. This is like a percussion preset from the AMS RMX 16, which is a classic reverb, classic digital reverb box that I just learned to use this from Bruce Swiddian, who used this on, Thriller. This is the famous Billie Jean reverb that he used on drums, and so this is just a way to create more space, to put the percussion in its own space, to add some depth to the mix so that it's not right on your ears. You're just giving it some space, a little texture and reverb, to give it its own space and its own texture and vibe. So that's that. I think that's all for the drums, and we can just listen to the drums soloed and in context. I'll listen to the drum verb. Also the drum verb here, I'm using the Slate Digital. I think this is emulating the Lexicon 250 reverb, which is just a plate. Right. So we'll hear the drums and its reverb together. This is myself on drums. This is Nate Worth from Snarky Puppy on percussion. Let's add some bass to that from Zach Geis. That's a good little rhythm section right there. A little drum and bass action. So moving on to the bass, we have, again, console channel emulation, doing some light compression. What's bass channel? Doing some light compression. First stage of compression from filtering. I'm filtering out everything above 7K. I'm filtering out everything under 50 hertz. Doing a 2 dB cut at, I think that's 710 hertz. And then I'm cutting, again, some low end, about 3 dB at 60 hertz. And we're doing some light compression. So next we'll have a Pultec again, doing that boost and then cut, boosting and attenuating at 60 hertz. Then we have some EQ. So this may look like a drastic cut for bass, low end cut for bass, but in the context of your mix, you either have to have your bass or your kick drum be the bottom end, and they have to work together to drive the song, right? So a lot of times, specifically depending on the type of bass sound that it is, I'll usually just cut more low end on the bass and then have the kick drum drive the song. Maybe because I'm a drummer and I think the kick drum drives the song, but that's just normally what I'll do, and I'll let you hear that. just cutting a little bit of that low end, but keeping the sound of the bass, the overall character of the bass. Then I'm boosting some 1.3K just to get some more of the string sound of his fingers. And then I'll usually cut here. Just didn't care for that frequency, that honkiness, so I took it out. Then we have the black box, which is basically just a saturation box. And it really sounds good on basses and synths, but this is a preset. I'll play with and without. A little level, a little saturation. It's not doing a whole lot. So Soothe again is being used as a side chain. So whenever the kick drum is being hit, the bass will be ducked, just so that the kick drum can come out and be more present in the mix. Right, then we have that. Then we have Little Radiator, which is another instance of saturation and harmonics, and it is really just adding a little bit of distortion too. Then we have some compression with the LA2A, which isn't doing a lot, just kind of gluing everything together, and then I have it going to a tape machine for that tape saturation and natural tape compression too. So let's hear that together. Next, let's get to the guitar. So let's start with the processing. So a lot of the heavy lifting is coming from this Corey Wong Archetype plugin, which is a really cool plugin, and it's from what I understand emulating, Corey Wong's amps and how he gets his guitar tones. It has 3 different types of amps, and you can you can play with different combinations of amp heads and the bottoms, and then you have effects. I'm using this 80s kind of chorusy doubler thing a lot on the album, as well as the delay, all subtly. It's not doing a whole lot. Then you have this amp EQ, this amp head EQ, and then you can play with different microphones. It's a really cool plugin to reamp and reshape the sound of your guitars or basses. I know Sam also uses this plugin as a saxophone effect too. But so we have that. Then we have before that we have some saturation through SSL. Then we have some EQ. A lot of this EQ again is subtractive, right? And these cuts here, they're not necessarily so much about the guitar sound itself, but these cuts are about just having your mix work together, all of the elements in your mix work together. So these are cuts that I'm making to make the bass stick out more, to make the keys stick out more. I'm carving the individual instruments, this case guitar, so that other instruments can be more present in my mix, right? Because these are instruments that are fighting for voltage, fighting in the same frequency ranges. So you want to cut out frequencies on certain instruments so that other instruments can be more present in your mix. Another instance of a Pultec, not doing anything, boosting at 2 dB at 5K. Again, I just want that analog sound. This is a preset that I got from Joe Carroll just through watching his videos, so I just left it on all of my guitars. Just doing a little compression. It's not doing a lot at all. It's barely hitting it. It's not doing a lot at all. This is adding just some room and slap delay, some room reverb and slap delay. And then this vitalizer, I'm using it as a stereo expander. It's probably actually doing something else. Again, adding some top end, just like it did to the snare drum top end and character. So what I want to do now is go back to signal flow, because I have my guitars and my keys and my synths going to a music bus, right? And so this looks like it's... So in the music bus, I have another instance of Vitalizer, which is doing some more stereo expanding, which is basically just widening out the mix. So it's taking all of the backing instruments, the guitars and the keys and the synths, and it's just kind of spreading it out a little bit so that the saxophone and lead instruments can be in the middle and they can be the focus of the mix, right? Also has some tape emulation on the music bus. So from the guitars, we can go to the keys, right? So I have the CP80, which is an electric piano. Then I have, let's listen to the CP80. Which seems to have some auto panning on it. I didn't do that, but it's on it. I believe this is an actual piano. This is an actual grand piano. And as you can see, like he played piano throughout the whole track, but I cut it where the electric piano is more present, just so that we can have just one thing be the main thing. One instrument be the main thing, right? And so I believe these are all being processed. These are all being processed through the same piano bus. So the CP80, high end and low end filtering, cutting out some gunk. Just didn't care for that frequency, so I cut it out. Then piano, this guy has some individual EQ. Cutting out all the low end I don't need, because I'm getting low end from the guitar, the bass, and the kick drum. So I'm trying to sculpt the sound while keeping the original sound, while also trying to make everything work together. Didn't care for that frequency, so I cut it out, and I added a little top end boost. And this Pultec is cutting about 3 dB at 100 hertz for the overall piano sound, the CP80 and the acoustic piano. And then I have Juno, which I don't think is very present in the mix. Using micro shift to kind of spread it a little bit and add some chorus effect to it. And then again, I'm doing some broad subtractive EQ. And then what's this guy here? Filtering out bottom end, subtractive EQ, and I'm boosting a little bit. So we can move on to organ. With organ, I want the high end to stick out a little bit more, because organs can get kind of lost, especially if they're not the main thing in the mix, the main keys in the mix. So I'm boosting some high end, and I'm cutting some 300 hertz area, and then I'm doing a little compression. The organ was mic'd with a AEA R88 microphone, which is a ribbon microphone, and then we have Rhodes. I believe one is affected and one isn't. This is the affected one with, I think, some chorus on it. And so I'm just blending those together, doing some EQ. Again, cutting in this section, because this is where a lot of these instruments live. So I want to give space to all of them. Doing a little, again, boosting and attenuating with a Pultec. And so that's all the keys. Let's hear this without the melody in. Let's hear it in this section. So from the keys, we can go to the horn bus. And as you can see, these are double-tracked horns, double-tracked trumpets and tenors and trombones. And we have individual tracks for bari, bass trombone, and another low trombone. And the thing about this, it gave me some issues because there was some phasing going on because Sam edited the shit out of these horns because he just wanted a tight horn sound. And when you put signal from the same microphone when you line them up like that, it creates phasing issues, especially the more that you process it. So that was something that we dealt with, and we kind of figured it out, but did the best that we could. So we're using the CLA vocals, really just for some reverb, cutting some top end, but really just some slap, delay, and a tight reverb. And then we're doing, this is a preset that I made. We're boosting some 5K. And then I'm using the SSL channel strip. Usually I'm doing some compression on this, but I didn't do it in this instance. Just some slight EQ cuts, and then I'm boosting at 10K, 3 dB at 10K, and I'm also filtering, but it's so low, it's not really doing anything. Well, filtering low end, but that's at 40 hertz. Then we're doing some EQ. Doing some EQ, some dynamic EQ, a cut at 2500. Didn't care for that frequency, but I wanted to boost a little of this area. Okay. Didn't care for that frequency, so I cut it out. And then I just wanted some more body, some more weight from the horns, especially in the trombones and the bari and the saxophones. So I boosted about 1.5 dB at 280 hertz. And just some low cuts, mostly subtractive EQ. Then I'll usually put some reverb on the channel, on the horn bus, just to give it its own space. And then a little bit of compression. Not much is happening. What I want to highlight here is that I have each channel of the horns going to a horns room bus, right? So because these horns were not recorded in the studio with us, they were recorded at people's home studios. I wanted to put the horns in its own space, so I used the Sound City plugin to emulate a room mic and having the horns be in a space. So let's add that in. This is without. It just adds a little bit of air to it, a little bit of room sound to the horns. Let's go over these vocals real quick. This is in the bridge. Really just some background vocals, CLA vocal plugin, mostly using this for reverb, some large reverb and some slap delay. We have some compression with the classic R compressor. It's not doing a whole lot. Then we have some EQ, cutting some lows at 122 hertz, cutting some mids at 450, and then cutting some high mids at 4 dB at 1K. Just didn't care for that sound, so I cut it out. And then we have some more EQ, some dynamic EQ, and the more fundamental frequencies of the vocals. And boosting, I'll usually boost around 600 because this adds, for whatever reason, around the 600 range, it helps to boost so that your vocals can cut through the entire mix. And then we're boosting some 6K for some top end, and then some more stages of compression, some light compression. You see I have 3 compressors. I'd rather have 3 compressors do the work than one that's just slamming it. And then you're also getting the texture, saturation, and harmonics and sound from these units, right? The 1176 and the LA two-way. They add texture and a sound to the signal. Then we have some Elosis Air EQ, which is doing some slight boost. This is 3K, and this is 200, boosting giving some more weight and body to the vocals. And then we're adding some air and adding some texture, I guess, to that part. Then we have the Oxford Inflator, which I said on the mix bus, it just adds some weight, some warmth, some saturation to the signal. Then we have Soothe on the Voice of God, which is Jason Joshua's preset. And it's not doing a whole lot. It's just kind of taming the vocal. And then we're finishing that off with a Studer tape emulation for some vocal presence. That's a preset that I saw somebody use, and it really does some good things to the vocals. And then we have our main parallel compression for the vocals, adding more level, adding more weight and body to the signal. And that's really it. And then we have our different effects, our delays, our reverbs. I use several different reverbs to give me different texture and character, and they're all doing different things. Some are longer, some are shorter, some are plates, some are chambers. And so I think the last piece is this this synth solo, which was played on Iwi by Sam. Saturation. Pultec, boosting some low end, boosting some highs. Some dynamic EQ to tame the lower mid frequencies, some low cuts, some high cuts, some more dynamic EQ on the top end. And I have this RMX 16. It's giving me some some reverb, some space, a little compression, and then I'm ending it off with some delay, which clearly adds a bunch of character and texture and sizzle to the overall sound of the solo. And then I'm sending it to the vocal, parallel compression, and then I'm doing some automation with delays and reverbs here. And that's really it. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this mix breakdown, getting a better understanding of the tune, getting a better understanding of what I do outside of drums as a mixing engineer. And I hope you like the tune. I hope you check it out. Check out the whole album. I mixed 8 songs on the album, which is Worst of Sam Greenfield. This was one of them. And let us know what you think. Peace.